And the core teaching is to love one another. Okay, that's the core teaching because it comes from the highest aspects. And all the highest aspects have come through, all the way through. They come through love one another. But the minute you start ritualizing it, the minute you start controlling it with hierarchies of who can get to what and who can't, now you're bringing in fear. And it's using fear to control the masses. If you don't do this, you'll go to hell. If you don't do this, you'll get your head cut off. If you don't follow the laws exactly, you're going to go to hell, you're going to get stoned, you're going to do it. So now you're controlling people by fear, not by love, which is totally against the core aspect of all simple religions, which says to love one another. So all the stuff that's been added, which people say is the Word of God, is not the Word of God. It's the word of various people trying to put themselves up and control. And where does that come from? That's the Illuminati coming in and taking control and setting things up. And once you've created 2 or 3 religions, well, you can set them against one another. And that's why they created countries. Because now you can set countries against each other. And the thing is, the Illuminati create all the wars on the planet. And they've created them all since 1300. Okay? Because the Illuminati are the very first weapons merchants. They became so rich because of discoveries they made in the Crusades that they became richer than the state, richer than the church, and they were the power brokers in Europe. And they were the weapons manufacturers. So they sold weapons to everyone, and they're still doing it. The Illuminati supplied weapons to the Nazis and the Americans in the Second World War. And every single other war that you want to name, if you follow the paper trail, it all comes back to the same people. We're supplying weapons to both sides. So, of course, the more wars they are, the more money they make. And because they control the governments, what they do is they set the governments up against one another and they manufacture wars that aren't there, so that they can continue to exploit the people, keep them controlled, because while they're fighting wars against one another, whether it's be religion or whatever it is, they can keep making money out of them and just exploit them. Exploit, 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 use, use, use. And that's why they think people are stupid. The greatest answer to that is, define what God is first, and then I can tell you whether I believe in it or whether it exists. Because everyone has a totally different answer to that, of what God is. Some people see God as a separate being that is all-powerful, that they have to submit to. Some people don't even believe there's a God. And you say, well, how do you explain the whole universe and everything? They'll come up with science's explanation. And science's explanation is changing every 24 hours as they come up with new information. Science is something that continually proves itself wrong. That's what science is. And you only have to look at the history of science. 100 years ago, man couldn't fly. Impossible. Oh, now man can. More than that, we're going to the... But we can't fly to the moon. We can't leave the planet. Oh, we've done that too. Okay? Science continually proves itself wrong. And the more science goes down the track, the more they're realizing that what the spiritualists are saying is actually true. Because this universe does not exist in reality. It only exists in perceived reality. You know, you can watch a film. What you're watching now is just dots of light reflecting on your retina. I'm not real. I'm not real. I'm just dots of light. But if you perceive it to be real, then you will believe that I'm a real person telling you real things. It's not. It's a perception. It's part of that choosing to experience. It's part of the illusion. The current Illuminati or the original Illuminati? Because there was, the name Illuminati originally came from being illuminated, i.e. aware, awakened of the truths of it. And as happens in all the time, power corrupts. And within that there are a group of people who wanted they had a better vision of the world. And they felt that the only way that they could do that was to control the people. But in doing that, the ultimate power corrupts everything. So they became controlling to the point where they believe that they're right and everyone else is wrong. Now, and they also are very much controlled by the Drakos in terms of their agendas. And they've worked their way through, and they control every government, every major corporation, you name it, it's all controlled, and it all filters back to a handful of families. And it's all to do with the bloodline. So we're talking about the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the JP Morgans, the royal families of Egypt, royal families of Europe. They're all tied into this bloodline. And that bloodline happens to be reptilian. It's a reptilian bloodline. And that's why we're so aware of people like George Bush and the Queen and that being able to shapeshift. People have seen them doing these reptilian shifts and going, whoa, because they're of that bloodline. So they're controlling everything through fear. What's their agenda? Ultimately, their agenda is they want to get into the fifth dimension. But along the way, it's all about just control everything and keep the sheeple as sheeple. Ultimately, the Drakos are at the top of the tree. They've been around in this universe for about 4 or 5 billion years, and because they've been around that long, they think they own this universe. And they go from planet to planet like a locust. You know, they'll go there and they strip it of all of its resources. And if there's a population there, they just infest themselves until they control the population. And then they strip the planet of its resources. So they're like a plague of locusts that go around, and they believe they have a right to do all of this. So they can do whatever they want. And they've genetically engineered the human race as a Trojan horse to try to get into the upper realms. Because they're fear-based and they're reptilian, it's like the reptilian brain we have, which is about pure survival and control and manipulation and all of those things, survival of the fittest and all of that, and lacking in emotion. They don't have emotion. So they can't access higher realms. But because they want to control everything, they think, well, we can't have a dimension in this universe that we can't control. So we have to control it. We have to invade it. We have to do what we do. So that's their agenda. It's not right or wrong. It's just that's their way of thinking. You know, we say when we see a snake attack a rabbit and kill it, the snake's not doing anything evil. It's just doing what a snake does. So the Drakos aren't evil. That's a judgment that people put on them. Okay, they're not evil. They're just doing what they do. And they're fulfilling the role of being the fear-based thing for the third dimension. They're playing out the bad guy that we need to experience stuff in the third dimension. Because if we didn't have that, there would be no third dimension. We'd all be in fifth dimension going, isn't everything wonderful? Their physical form and spiritual form, because they're lower fourth dimensions, which means they can be in third dimension, lower fourth dimension. So they're capable of shape-shifting. So there will be a physical reptilian form, but they will look to you as if they're human. They can also, their consciousness can oversee a physical human form, like a shadow. Okay, so see, we get so locked into thinking that our human body is solid. And science tells us it's not. It's 99.9% space. Okay, but we perceive it solid because of our own filters. So therefore it's quite possible for another entity to exist in the same space that you exist. And if your switches are switched on, then they can control you through those, like a remote control. But if you flick those switches off, they can't control you. In order to switch off the DNA, because within your DNA you've got all sorts of different switches, and it's like a giant airplane cockpit. They're everywhere. You know, some of them are the thrusters, some of them are the navigators, some of them is a fuel gauge to see how much energy you've got. They've all got a purpose. And some of those switches are reptilian, that says, well, we're going to totally control everything through the reptilian switches. So the way to do it is you do a visualization, a meditation, whatever it is you want to do, and you go in there and you physically find those switches and you flick them off. You turn them off. And once they're turned off, they can't activate. If you want to, you can rip the whole wiring out. Whatever you want to do to deactivate that, you can. And then you can look around and you can find the aspects of your higher self. You know, they might be over here glowing in gold, and you flick them on and turn them on full, so that you allow yourself to be in a full level of awareness. Because it's all there. You can do whatever you want. It's your cockpit. If we had a whole lot of 9-foot tall reptilians walking around the planet, people would freak out. Okay? So what better way to control the masses than to have an organisation of hybrid forms that appear to be human but are totally controlled by you, or you're part of their running their agenda, and they do all the dirty work for you under the guise of being good. See, we have a United Nations, and the United Nations is a Drakos-run organisation. But if you tell the people they're doing good things and you publicise, and this is where controlling the media helps as well, if you publicise all of the good things that you do here, while at the same time you're totally ripping the shit out of everything down here, people only see that. Because very few people will dig deeper to find out what's really going on. Very few people have dug deep to understand that the AIDS virus and Ebola virus and swine flus and all these things were actually created by these people. And it's documented. It's documented that the World Health Organization, which is an offshoot of the United Nations, they created these viruses for a purpose, to pull the population down. They have an agenda to bring the world population down. But most people don't dig any deeper. They lead superficial lives. People just have to dig around for themselves. You know, go onto YouTube. Take everything with a pinch of salt. You know, don't believe everything that you see, everything you hear, but importantly, don't disbelieve it either. Run it through your own filters. And you know, there's a simple thing. If it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, and it walks like a duck, it's probably a duck. You know, the most simple answer is usually the most appropriate one. So the more that you're seeing bullshit and the more your stuff doesn't seem to add up, go deeper. There'll be a reason behind it, why somebody's trying to hide something. And often it's not what people tell you, it's what they don't tell you. And this is where NASA is brilliant, because NASA, you know, will tell you some things, but then they won't